Completing the square is a way of rewriting a quadratic equation, and I will show you here how to write or how to complete the square using just general numbers, which are going to be represented by the letters here. So the first step here is to factor out an a. When we do this, I get x squared plus b over a x, and I'll just keep this as plus c equals 0. Now if I look at the term that's linear and I take its coefficient, which is b over a, I take that and divide by 2, and then square that whole thing. This gives me b squared all over 4a squared. I'm going to take this and add and subtract it within the parentheses here in order to rewrite the quadratic equation. So I have a x squared plus b over a times x. I'll add b squared over 4a squared. I'll then subtract b squared over 4a squared. If I add and subtract it, it doesn't change anything within the parentheses. We have plus c equals 0 on the outside. Now, right here, we can factor this. And I'll rewrite this as, in parentheses, x plus b over 2a, that whole thing squared. I still have, outside of this purple parentheses, I have b squared all over 4a squared plus c equals 0. I distribute in this a to the term that's within the purple parentheses, and then also to that other term there. I can now rewrite this as a x plus b over 2a, this whole thing squared, minus a times b squared over 4a squared plus c. Here we have the a's cancel, and I can write this as a times x plus b over 2a squared minus b squared over 4a plus c equals 0. If you would continue with this and solve for x, you'll notice that you'll get the quadratic formula. But let's do an example with actual numbers instead of working with the letters, just to see how we can do this. So looking at the coefficient here, this is a 2. I'll factor out a 2. This is x squared plus 12x. And I'll keep plus 7 over here. That equals 0. Now I look at the coefficient on the linear term, this one here. I take 12 divided by 2, that whole thing squared. This gives me 6 squared, which is 36. I'll use that number and add and subtract it so that I'm adding 0, which doesn't change anything. Add 36, subtract 36, close the parentheses, plus 7 equals 0. here I have something that can be factored. This is 2 times x plus 6 squared minus 36 plus 7 equals 0. Now I'll distribute this 2. This gives me 2x plus 6, that whole thing squared, minus 36 times 2, which is 72, plus 7 equals 0. I then just simplify the 7 minus 72. Just to double check, it should give me negative 65. So I have 2x plus 6 squared minus 65 equals 0. And we've successfully completed the square now. So that's the step where we've completed the square and we've simplified. Now we'll use this to solve for x. So we take 65 to the other side by adding 65. This is 65. I'll divide both sides by 2. We get x plus 6, everything squared equals 65 over 2. Not a very nice number, but that's okay. We'll then take the square root of both sides. I get x plus 6 equals the square root, 65 over 2. I'll put plus or minus here as well. And then the last step is just to subtract 6. So x equals negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 65 over 2. Let's write this in a different way. So it's 32.5. I'll write this as the square root of 32.5. So we have two different solutions here. Negative 6 plus the square root of 32.5 and negative 6 minus the square root of 32.5.